Welcome back to the table and more of our On the Road to Gen Con coverage. This one is very special. In fact, I wasn't even sure this was going to be at Gen Con.
I was going to say, you didn't even put it on your anticipated list, and I was very surprised about that.
Yeah, she asked me that the other day. By the way, we're talking about My Islands from Cosmos. This is one that I've been anticipating for quite some time. I thought at one point that it might be out last Essen, then it wasn't. And I still think, as of now, its official release, I believe, is still Essen.
Okay.
I think they're going to be demoing it for sure. But, and this is by no means inside information, I have heard rumors that maybe there's a small amount of these that they might be selling. But I don't know that. Don't hold me to it. Don't quote me. Certainly don't tell them I said it.
But be on the lookout.
But maybe be on the lookout. Because if you liked My City at all, I can't help but imagine you're going to like this one even more. We haven't played a ton of it. And by the way, we're not going to spoil anything. I don't think so. We are going to give you information based on the first time you'd open the box and the first envelope that you open. So that's, I don't think, spoilery.
No.
But this game is a lot like My City, but also very different. So we want to talk about that. But for those of you who've never played My City and you're thinking, what is My Island? Well, let us tell you a little bit about that.
Sure. So My City and My Island, they are a tile placement game that you're playing competitively against. So it's from 2 to 4 players, and it's also a legacy game.
Yes.
So as we keep going through different episodes, there are 24 episodes over 8 different chapters. New things are changing. You're putting things on the board, you're getting new tiles.
Stickering things.
Yes, you are opening things that cannot be unopened. In My City, there was a whole ton of that, right?
Yes.
Things changed dramatically from the beginning to the end. And some things you look at the board, you notice right away, like there are all these little places, these little shapes. There's a whole area at the bottom that's empty.
If you've ever played a board game, and particularly a legacy board game, you can just look at some of this and go, well, something's going to go here. Like there's little corner spaces, so I imagine some stickers are going to go down here eventually. Same thing like Emily said with some of these icons. And at the beginning, the rule set is very simplistic, and I remember this being the case with My City. The very first episode of the very first chapter, you play it and you're like, I remember feeling like, it's kind of basic.
It's very simple.
Like it's
very, very simple.
Almost too basic if you're an enthusiast gamer, but if you stick with it, it is maybe the perfect entree into legacy gaming, in my opinion. Like if you've never experienced that, this is just like, you really get an appreciation for how a game can evolve because it keeps giving you opportunities to score points differently. It starts taking away the way you have been scoring points.
So you have to change your strategy over time, right?
You have to put some of what you thought you knew out of your mind because you're like, oh, that's right. That thing doesn't count anymore.
Yes.
And you might even find yourself from one episode to the next starting to do that and going, oh, that's right. Oh, I shouldn't have placed them this way because that doesn't even matter this time.
Yes. And speaking of forgetting what you thought you knew, My Island is going to kind of do that for people who have played My City before.
Yes.
So we're flipping cards and it's showing us which tile we're going to place on our board. But the tiles are different this time.
Way different.
They are not just a single color building. They are tiles of different sizes between 2 and 4 to start. We don't know if it gets more crazy than that.
Yeah.
And they have different types of terrains on them. So when you're placing something, it's not just like, oh, I'm placing out a blue building, I'm going to put it next to the other blue buildings. It's like, I'm placing out this 3 space, and it has a building, a farm, and a road. And where do I want to put that next to each other? Knowing that they have to at least touch one other thing that's already been in part of your island that matches.
Yeah, the matches part is key. And in fact, I think I could see a lot of people playing the first 2 episodes and accidentally breaking that rule.
Yes.
Because you have to, if you have a red and a blue exposed where you could play more tiles, the next tile better have a red and a blue on it, or you don't play it. And in this case, just like My City, if you can't or don't want to place a tile that the card says, you simply turn it face down, but you lose a point. Because everyone starts each chapter or each episode with 10 points. So you have some points to spend, but believe me, you don't want to spend points if you don't have to. But it's a really interesting thing, like Emily was saying, because there's different colors, different shapes, there's a lot more variables going around in your head in terms of like, how can I place this? Because I think, and it's been a minute since I played My City, but
I played it more recently.
My recollection is this building comes out, and you kind of knew, if that was the building that was going to be flipped, you kind of knew where you were going to put that building. In fact, oftentimes you'd be like, oh, please be that one building.
Yeah.
Flip that next card. In this one, you might want a shape or a size.
Ideally.
But like you're not thinking a lot, I want that one specific tile.
Well, and it's specifically too, because in this way, it just has to be one thing that's touching. You could have multiple different things that would work. You're like, as long as it has a red and it's in either this position or that position, I'm good. Which is very different than, like you were saying, in My City, you'd be like, okay, I need to have the T and it needs to be blue, and that's what needs to go right here. But also the way this map is set up, it starts with 4 different types of island spaces. So you have the beach around the edge that you have to start with, and then the heathers, and then the palm trees, and then the foresty part in the middle. At first, you're only doing the very outsides of it.
Yeah, so you can't use the palms or the forest.
There's obvious room for the game to grow, right? Yeah. But it's also very weirdly shaped. It's not like the nice, 10 by 10 grid that you're used to. It's like all these weird hexes, and it takes a few rounds for you to really get used to okay, so one side's bigger than the other. They kind of get more narrow there. Like, what is the available play space? And it takes you a moment to think about, what can I use? Where do I put it? How do I not get myself stuck?
Yeah, and what you're doing, at least in this game in the first episode, is you want to cover up the beach. And in fact, I imagine that's going to be the case for a while. But again, don't be surprised if they take that rule away. But any beach space that's exposed at the end of an episode is negative points. And you also want to put the little house, which is the red hex, as many of those on the beach, because you get a point when you do that. So that's effectively how the game starts.
Yes.
It is just that. Then Chapter 2 or Episode 2 introduces getting the same color in a row of 3. And whenever you do that, you can place a cube and you get 3 points immediately. And this is where it's like, that's just scratching the surface. But as you can imagine, when you introduce a rule like that, it's very easy as a player to go, I'm going to do that.
Yes.
You do a ton of it, you get a lot of those 3-point grabs, but then at the end of the round, you realized you haven't been thinking well enough about filling the beach or maybe getting those houses. So it's really interesting because players can play very differently, and that's, I'd say, one of the last things I'd say about this compared to My City. My City, most people played differently, but it was easier to play in a very similar fashion, like, we both have that purple house, I'm going to put it here, you put it pretty much there too. This one, it changes wildly almost immediately from the very first tile.
Yeah, because you don't really know what to do with this map right away, right? And because you have more options. I also felt like the difference between the very first one and the second one was much greater for me in My Island than it was in My City.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like the whole first episode in My City seemed kind of like, okay, that was pretty... And it's not like this is ratcheting out to super heavy all of a sudden.
No.
But it is like, I had a lot more moments, even in the second chapter, where I was just like, dang, what do I want to do here? And making bigger decisions of do I lose points early to try to get this right? That came for me a lot faster in My Island than it was happening in My City. So I'm excited to see where the game takes it in even further and further plays.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we did take a peek in things, and again, no spoilers, but we can tell you just from having looked in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, which would take you through to Episode 9 of 24, particularly with the third chapter, there were some very unique,
different things going on,
and quite flavorful things going on with the island. So I can't wait to see how more of that evolves.
Yeah.
But if you have any questions at all about the game, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can without spoiling anything.
Sure.
Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.